September 1944. Europe is ablaze. Across the battered continent, Allied tanks grind relentlessly toward Berlin. Radio broadcasts crackle with reports of cities falling and armies retreating. But far from the front lines, in a quiet office, a single envelope lies unopened on the polished wooden desk of a Canadian general. The world's attention is fixed on the thunder of war. No one is watching this room. No one but the shadows, stretching longer as the sun dips behind the war-torn horizon. Inside the envelope, a letter that could end a man's career and shatter the very foundation of an empire. The letter comes from the most powerful British commander in Europe. Its message is short, cold, and absolute. Apologize, or face the consequences. Words are sharp, designed to cut. For any ordinary officer, the threat would be paralyzing. But the British have overlooked something crucial. The man at this desk is not just a colonial subordinate. He's a different breed, forged in fire, ready to rewrite the rules in the midst of the greatest military campaign history has ever seen. The clock ticks, 24 hours. That's all he has. One decision, one reply, and the balance of power could shift. The story you're about to hear isn't just about military strategy. It's about pride, defiance, and a silent war fought in the shadows of leadership. To understand how this moment explodes into history, you must first know the men at its heart. On one side, Field Marshal Bernard Law Montgomery, Monty, to Britain. He's a hero. The man who, after the humiliation of Dunkirk and years of defeat, brought the British people hope and victory again. In 1942, at El Alamein, he crushed Rommel's notorious Afrika Korps, turning retreat into triumph. But Monty's reputation hides a darker edge. He is ruthless, obsessively controlling, a man who tolerates no dissent. His word is law. Challenge him, and you're finished. But across the Tentacross, the very fabric of the Allied command, stands Harry Crerar, the Canadian general. Crerar isn't flashy. He avoids the spotlight, but every step he takes is measured, every word calculated. He's fiercely loyal to Canada, proud of his men, and quietly determined to prove that Canada is no longer a pawn on Britain's imperial chessboard. The 1st Canadian Army under his command is 175,000 strong, the largest force Canada has ever sent to war. These soldiers are not inexperienced colonials. They're veterans who stormed Juno Beach on DAJ, who liberated French towns at a terrible cost, who fought their way up the Italian peninsula. They've bled for every inch of Europe, and they've earned their seat at the table. But in Montgomery's eyes, they're still just another set of pieces to be moved. The chain of command to Monty is sacred. Defy him, and the consequences are absolute. As the Allied advance grinds to a halt and logistics buckle under the strain, every choice matters. And in the middle of this crucible, Montgomery calls a meeting. All army commanders are to attend. No exceptions. But Crerar, the Canadian, faces his own ghosts. He makes a choice that will turn the simmering tension into outright confrontation. A choice that will force the world to see Canada in a new light. September 1944. The war's pulse is pounding at a fever pitch. Allied troops are exhausted and hungry for victory, but the front lines are stalled. Commanders know that even the smallest mistake could tip the scales. In headquarters tents across Europe, orders flow like rivers, strict, urgent, and unquestioned. But on one fateful day, those orders meet a wall. Montgomery's summons is clear. Every army commander, present and punctual, at a critical staff meeting. The message is not a request, it's a command. Everyone understands that absence means insubordination. But as the tent fills with high-ranking officers, one seat is conspicuously empty. General Harry Crerar, Canada's top soldier, has vanished. The news spreads like wildfire through the Allied command. Whispers, then angry murmurs. Where is Crerar? Some suspect illness, others a logistical snag. But the truth is more dangerous than anyone imagines. Carrera, on this particular day, is nowhere near the headquarters. He has traveled to the battered French port of Dieppe, a place that still bleeds in the collective memory of Canada. 2 years earlier, the beaches of Dieppe became a graveyard. On August 19, 1942, the Canadian 2nd Division launched a daring raid, hoping to test German defenses and rally Allied spirits. Instead, they found hell. In a matter of hours, nearly 1,000 Canadians were killed, and double that number taken prisoner. The sand ran red. The cost was unspeakable. The memory of Dieppe haunts Carrera, as it haunts every Canadian family who lost a son that day. Word of Carrera's absence rockets through Montgomery's headquarters. The British Field Marshal's temper, legendary and feared, erupts. In his eyes, this is no minor infraction. This is mutiny, a direct challenge to his authority at the most critical moment of the campaign. The staff freezes as Montgomery's rage fills the air. He will not tolerate being ignored. He drafts a letter that is both execution and exile. The language is precise, glacial. Carrera is to be relieved of command, stripped of his post, and sent back to England in disgrace. His military career, years of service, sacrifice, and achievement will end in a single, cold stroke of a pen. Yet, as Montgomery's ultimatum is dispatched, he makes a single, fateful miscalculation. He believes Carrera will fold, beg forgiveness, and accept humiliation to save his position. After all, that is what colonial officers do, they obey. But Harry Carrera is no ordinary subordinate, and the answer he is about to send will echo far beyond the walls of headquarters, challenging not just a man, but the might of an empire. Night falls over Allied headquarters. The tension is suffocating, a sense that something irreversible is about to happen. Carrera receives Montgomery's letter, the paper crisp, the words sharp as a blade. Relinquish your command. Return to England. The message is a death sentence for any military career. Outside, officers whisper, awaiting the inevitable. Will Carrera surrender? Will he beg for mercy? The stakes could not be higher, but inside his quarters, Carrera is calm, his resolve hardening like steel. He knows history is watching, even if no one else realizes it yet. The envelope sits on his desk, heavy with implication. He reads it once, then again. Instead of panic, a cold determination settles in. For years, Canada has been treated as a junior partner, its soldiers seen as extensions of British power. But now, Carrera understands. This is more than a personal attack. This is a crossroads for his entire nation. He sits, pen in hand, and writes his reply. Each word is a calculated move, a piece in a high-stakes game. He doesn't grovel, he doesn't apologize. His message is measured, quietly defiant. If you wish to relieve me of command, proceed. But be aware that I serve at the pleasure of the Canadian government. The authority to remove me does not lie solely with you. Any such action will require explanation to Ottawa, to the Canadian Parliament, and to the people who sent us here. In that moment, Carrera plays what historians would call the Ottawa card, a stroke of political genius. With a single sentence, he shifts the balance of power. The implications are seismic. No longer is this just a matter of military discipline. Now it is a diplomatic crisis. If Montgomery follows through, he will answer not just to British command, but to the Canadian government, the press, and the public, both in London and in Ottawa. The effect is immediate. The letter moves swiftly up the Allied hierarchy. The reality dawns on those in power. Canada is not a colony anymore. Its army, funded and commanded by Canadians, is no longer a piece on Britain's chessboard. The world is watching, and an international scandal looms if Montgomery pushes forward. Behind closed doors, the British command grapples with the consequences. Imagine the headlines. British dismiss Canadian general for honoring fallen soldiers. The outcry in Ottawa would be deafening. Parliament would demand answers. Even Churchill and King George would be drawn into the storm. The fragile alliance, already strained by tensions between Americans and British, could fracture at the worst possible moment. In this quiet standoff, WWII-era's calm defiance throws Montgomery off balance. The field marshal, so used to obedience, finds himself trapped a commander who has overplayed his hand. The room is silent, the future uncertain, the fate of an empire hanging on a single letter. Dawn breaks over Allied headquarters, but nothing feels ordinary. The air is thick with anticipation and unspoken questions. Montgomery's threat has been met not with submission, but with a quiet, immovable resistance that no one saw coming. WWII's letter, now the talk of every corridor, is more than a reply. It's a declaration. The Canadian general has not just defended his honor. He's drawn a line in the sand for his entire nation. Now finds himself in a checkmate of his own making. He cannot quietly dismiss WWII. He cannot risk an international scandal that would ripple through Ottawa, London, and every Allied capital. The threat of public outrage looms. The unity of the Allied coalition, already fragile, hangs by a thread. Montgomery's hand is forced. There is no grand apology, no handshake for the cameras. Instead, the incident is buried, tucked away in official reports and classified files. Yet, within the Allied High Command, the message is unmistakable. Canada will not be bullied. The days of unquestioning obedience are over. Pride surges through the ranks of the Canadian Army. Soldiers at the front learn that their general stood up to a legendary British field marshal and prevailed. In muddy trenches and ruined villages, battered Canadians lift their heads a little higher. Their sacrifices have earned them more than medals. They have earned respect. Back home in Ottawa, the political leadership receives quiet confirmation. Their insistence on sovereignty, on Canadian command over Canadian troops, is vindicated. For years they've balanced the ties of Commonwealth with the need for independence. Now WWII's stand proves that independence is no longer just a principle on paper, is reality. For the British, the lesson is stark. The empire is changing. The dominions once unquestioning, once compliant are, now partners, not subordinates. Within months, Canadian troops will liberate the Netherlands, their sacrifices recognized across Europe. They'll be celebrated, not as British proxies, but as Canadian sovereign, steadfast and fiercely proud. The war ends. At the peace conferences, Canada no longer waits quietly in the background. Canadian diplomats sit as equals, their nation's voice heard in the creation of the United Nations, NATO, and the post-war order. The thread that began with WWII's letter runs straight through to Canada's emergence as a true middle power. And what of the lesson? In that brief, tense exchange, a universal truth is revealed. Respect isn't given, it's taken. WWII could have submitted, played the obedient subordinate, and protected his career. Instead, he risked it all for principle and for the dignity of his nation. Montgomery, so used to Dominion obedience, was forced to recognize that the world had changed. This story isn't just about one missed meeting or one act of remembrance at Dieppe. It's about a nation's refusal to accept a subordinate role. About the moment Canada demanded and claimed its place as an equal on the world stage. So when you think of Canadian military history, don't just recall Vimy Ridge or Juno Beach. Remember September 1944, the moment a Canadian general looked the British Empire in the eye and said, "No more." That's the day Canada stopped being a dominion and started being a nation. And the world would never be the same.